What is going on, everyone? As promised, here's part 2 of that wonderful interview that we were just watching in the last video. So we're going to get right back into it. Don't forget to smash that like button so that YouTube shares this with as many people as possible. And don't forget to subscribe if you're new, because I've got content like this dropping every single day. And now, without any further ado, let's get to that interview.
I absolutely can't stand them to this day. I draw a lot of parallels right now between Goldman and Citadel. I draw parallels between Goldman and Robinhood. And as it segues now into, now ask your deposition question.
Okay, well, I want to know, what did it cost you in your business, the firm, yourself, the fact that that Goldman did this to your firm and to the stocks?
Well, they basically took a $2 billion business and made it a $1 billion business, and I sent all the money back. Personally, I'm not going to get into the money that it cost me, but it was a, let's see, a 9-figure sum. So it was significant.
You suggested you think they did this because they actually had not borrowed the shares, that you had paid them. And what makes you think that that's the case?
Well, I know it's the case.
How?
I know it's the case because post fact, after I did the deposition for Overstock and Goldman, and Byrne, prevailed eventually, he sent my lawyer information and emails from Goldman where were specifically mentioned where they admit they didn't have the shares borrowed. They admit to everything, which is why Overstock ended up prevailing against Goldman. They admitted to not having the shares borrowed, and we were mentioned by name.
Well, in the time of 2008, when Goldman was doing this to you, there was a period when SEC was investigating Goldman on naked shorting. I think at one point they fined them a big $15 million. What should SEC have done? And were you making any complaints about what was going on, what Goldman was doing to you?
Well, let's say the SEC went after Goldman in 2008, 2009. And I need you to go back to this question on my Overstock deposition, right?
I will. We'll get to that.
Okay. So as it turns out, the dirty little secret, and I have to be careful what I say because I've signed something, because I appealed it. I was the source to the SEC about the Goldman naked shorting. I talked to the office, the SEC out of Chicago, who did the investigation of what Goldman did to us of the naked shorting. And I whistle blew the entire thing after they settled. Goldman settled with the SEC. And I think it took them 5 years and a couple changes in SEC administration to finally reject my whistleblowing thing, my whistleblowing papers, even though I was the guy who exposed Goldman.
Now, was this, I know that in 2010, but there may have been more than a few cases, the SEC sued Goldman, accused it of willfully failing to pre-borrow shares as required for short selling in January 2009, and that was shortly after Copper River went out of business. And this case involved 385 short sales in which the firm had not located shares for its brokerage clients to borrow. Goldman paid $450,000 to settle the case without admitting or denying the accusations. That's under $1,200 a trade. That's hardly below the cost. That's way below the cost of doing business. Probably the cost of a nice business dinner. And so meanwhile, the Overstock case against Goldman and Merrill was going on. First, initially the 12 big brokers, then narrowed to those 2. And Overstock charged that Goldman and Merrill failed to borrow its shares. Now, you were not a party to the suit. And since the older suit against Rocker, as you said, you were not pals. You were asked in the deposition if you wanted to help Overstock, and you said absolutely not. So, but your deposition in that lawsuit is very damning of Goldman, including its use of options conversions to create fake shares to trade or lend out. And I read that Goldman tried to seal your court transcript. How did you find out about the options conversions, and how did they work?
What goes on, what you say with your fine, basically, I'll simply say crime pays. So whoever is out there watching this, or whoever listens to what I have to say, listen to this carefully. Your brokerage firm does not give a rat's fucking ass about you. Robinhood could care less about you. None of these brokerage firms could care about you. They've all paid significant fines. Citadel's paid huge fines. Robinhood's paid fines. All these guys have paid fines. And it's basically like paying a speeding ticket. They just don't care. They don't care. They don't make changes. They don't give a rat's ass about you. So when we did this deposition, if you will, I couldn't stand Goldman. I couldn't stand Overstock. My lawyer, Shapiro, who was with me at the deposition, told the Goldman lawyer, do not ask Mark about Goldman and what Goldman did with the firm. Stay away from that, because that is red meat in front of a jaguar. And sure enough, the lawyer did, and I just lit into him. And I went over exactly how Goldman does business. And you know, these conversions, if you will, are or should be illegal, but there's a little loophole in this that I'll get into later. And basically, if Goldman and or market makers in stocks and in options can be short the stock without a borrow. They can short you stock without them borrowing it, and they sell calls. They sell deep in the money calls for a premium, and they buy deep in the money puts, and they then sell you the fake or created shares where there's no borrow. And you have the shares, and when the borrow gets pulled or bought in, they simply reverse that trade, let's say for June, and roll it to July. And then when the issue happens in July, they roll July into August. So they keep rolling this trade as long as the customer wants it without ever having to deliver the shares. Now, there's a loophole that says market makers do not need to borrow shares to keep, in quotes, air quote, a fair and orderly market. And this is where the so-called naked shorting or shorting without a borrow comes from. Citadel, if they're a market maker in this day and age, can be short all the pick the name you want. And they don't need a borrow, and they don't need to pay the borrow fees, because if asked, they're maintaining a fair and orderly market. So market makers can legally, and this is the irony of this whole thing, can legally be naked short a stock without a borrow, because that is the law and that is the rule. Now, if people want to change the rule, that's a whole different thing. But everyone who's complaining about naked shorting in this day and age, whether it's GME or AMC or things like that, you need to look no further than the market makers. See, back before the SEC changed the rule in 2008, 2009, whenever they were doing it, and prior to then, you could do these option conversions, and they weren't viewed per se as illegal, or as illegal as a customer would look at it. So this is very technical stuff. This is done by the higher ups and computers and people who run these numbers, and the Citadels of the world who make markets in options and who do this kind of stuff. They're not breaking the law per se. They're not, because they'll say they're maintaining a fair and orderly market. But one, they're making an absolute fortune doing this. Two, they don't have to pay the huge negative rebate fee that individuals or institutions pay for. And these guys are the true enemy, along with the Kramer types who do what he did in the video you showed. So there's a huge misunderstanding out there about what really goes on. I mean, what really and truly goes on and how it goes on. And it's dirty as hell. And it needs to stop. But I just throw my arms in the air. I'm a 61-year-old guy. And I fought a lot of fights, and I'm a little worn out with some of this bullshit. But, it's what goes on. It's sick. It's not right. It's not fair. It's the deck stacked against the Joe Sixpacks of the world. And it's further stacked where the Citadels, who to me are the villains in this show, they would love nothing more than the Reddit crowd to keep fussing about this, because it's really not where the bodies and the dead bodies are buried.
Okay. Now, in the deposition, you said, in answering the questions, that about some companies, and then you indicated Goldman, well, they were like the mafia, and they were running a black box. They didn't know what the people didn't know. Their clients didn't know the cost. They didn't know here's the rate. You want to borrow it? This is the rate. And you said, I think the securities lending market is like the mob. It's rigged. It's manipulated. And you said it was like Goldman. So can you talk about that? What was Goldman doing that made it, aside from the way they treated you, which is certainly not an advertisement for getting more clients, what else might they have been doing that made them like the mob?
Okay. What else they've been doing, I don't know what else they're doing. I just want to speak as it relates to me and what I know.
Yes.
So Goldman is in the business of making money for Goldman. Robinhood's in the business of making money for Robinhood, and Citadel's in the business of making money for Ken Griffin, right? Goldman can loan out Procter & Gamble. Goldman can loan out Philip Morris. Goldman can loan out IBM, and they make 2 or 3 basis points. They make next to nothing. In stocks that are, in quote, hard to borrow or in demand to borrow, the rates can go anywhere from 3% to 100%. And depending on Goldman's cost of creating the share, that's not counterfeiting, that's creating the shares, they figure out what it costs for them to create it in options, puts and calls, create the shares, to loan them to me. If it costs them 30% annually, they then go and charge me 45. So they'd make 15% on something that basically they didn't have to even pay me. So they'd make 15%, but I would never get the share. I'm paying them 45, assuming I have legitimate shares, right? I'm paying them 45, assuming that they're paying you 42 to lend me the shares, right? Legitimately doing it. Because if I knew what was going on, I would have never done it. No one in their right mind would have ever done it. I didn't know that. And the reason I know it is Burns' lawyers sent my lawyers internal emails from Goldman that came out in discovery, where Goldman admitted to what they were doing, admitted to how they figured out the numbers, admitted that this was what they were doing. So when the government pulls out the rug from under Goldman and said you have to settle in 3 days, Goldman says, we're either going to choke on it, or we might as well put Cohodes and crew out of business, or put them in such a way where they can't fight back. Because I could have fought back, but they prevented me from moving the shares. They prevented Fairlawn from taking our positions, and we had some great positions. But these brokerage firms, where Kramer is right and where Kramer is wrong, is he may have been running his floating crap game while he was at the hedge fund. That's up to you and him to figure out. But it's definitely what the brokerage firms would do to their clients. It's definitely what they would do. It's what they did to me. They've done it to others. They did it to Melvin in this past go round of when it happened to him. And
you cited emails. Let me mention a couple of the emails that you said that you were sent. And the reason we know about this, rather funny. You gave a deposition in 2011. So in 2012, the Goldman lawyer, by mistake, he had a motion that aimed to keep the discovery secret that Overstock had gotten. And by mistake, he attached to his motion to keep everything secret some of the secrets that he wanted to keep secret. And so in one, the Goldman clearing operations tells Wolverine Trading, a major client, we will let you fail. In another, dealing with the requirement to locate shares that can be bought to close shorts, but which routinely aren't, as you have said, a Goldman executive said, we have to be careful not to link locates to fails because we have told regulators we can't. So what you have said is backed up now by the discovery that came out then. Now you have said that the only person who has been successful in suing Goldman in the history of the world is Patrick Byrne. His case was filed in state court in California. It was dismissed by the judge on grounds of jurisdiction and standing. So how was he successful?
Because he told them he lost on jurisdictional grounds, and he basically said, fine, I'll sue you cocksuckers in New Jersey. And Goldman wanted no piece of it, especially after that deposition, because more of it would come out. So before Byrne filed it in New Jersey, he settled with them. And he settled with them for a tidy sum.
He got $20 million from Goldman, and then a year or so later, $20 million from Merrill Lynch. And now, but you said people don't usually sue Goldman. It takes 5 to 15 years, and who can fight them? They're so powerful. They're so tied to the government. So what is the way?
It is very hard in circa 2021 figuring out the way it is. I mean, the best you can do is try to speak out and try to create attention and try to have your facts right and speak to what you know, and don't talk crazy talk and hope people take you seriously. Now, there are a lot of people out there who can make a difference, who take me very seriously in these matters. And I'm not going to get into exactly what I have going on these matters, but I'm going to try to move the needle to help some of these people out. Even though some of these people think it's fun to attack me, we'll see what happens. But if you're going to win, you have to sort of keep your mouth shut. You have to have them think that you're not doing anything, and you don't know much. And when there's a time, you strike. And when there's the right time, I will strike.
Now, how's weird and interesting time? And you talked a little before about Citadel. So let's take the jump. Maybe it's not such a big jump from Goldman to Citadel. How does Citadel now compare? How does it compare to Goldman in 15 years ago?
Let me just finish off a little bit with some of these things. Goldman now has had their regulatory head kicked in. And Goldman used to be thought of as a premium place. It's not thought of as a premium place anymore. It's thought about it as just kind of a bunch of greedy scumbags trying to rip people off. And the company, which used to be a pristine image place, now trades at a very, very, very low multiple. So Goldman's basically had their heads kicked in. They're very highly regulated, and sort of the cat's out of the box between that M1DB or whatever they call it and all their chicanery, all the bullshit they've done. People are sort of onto it. And Goldman 2.0, or really 3.0, is Citadel. I mean, Citadel right now is 32 times more dangerous than Goldman ever was. Because he's so leveraged. This is Griffin, and he's a genius, by the way. He is not a dope. He knows exactly what he's doing. He is hugely leveraged. He's tied into every part of the market. He's in hedge fund. He's in trading. He's in market making. He's in ARB. He's in pay for flow. He has every single table at the casino and the eye in the sky and the bank covered. He is on every part of every trade, this guy. And he's hired former government lawyers, officials. He has Bernanke. He used to pay Janet Yellen. He's got everybody. So he has this thing tied and wired soup to nuts.
You said you see all the sides of the trades. This is like a poker game and somebody's going around and looking at all the cards. How can that be legal if you're seeing both sides of the trades?
So, Lucy, as I've said before, I am not a lawyer. I am not a regulator. I do not set the law. I cannot enforce the law. I can just speak my mind. He has all sides of all trades in the names. He has all sides. That is not a debate. And that includes the biggest scam going, which is this payment for order flow. Now, there's experts on payment for flow, and there's experts on options. There's experts on market making. There's experts on all this stuff, right? I'm not an expert on any of it. I know a lot about all of it. And I can help guide whoever needs help through this. But what completely screws up the argument by the Wall Street Bets and Reddit and whatever crowd that has you is you get down these rabbit holes and you can get lost. You know, this whole argument about how many shares are in the float. You know, they keep changing this, or they used extra boxed or extra fail, right? Griffin and Citadel want you to focus on that because it doesn't mean jack fucking shit to anybody. And they basically could say, who cares? What matters and what's key? And if you get in those who are listening to this, and I hope a lot of people do, if you get nothing out of this, I want you to listen to what I'm about to say, okay? When Robinhood and the long-haired guy who runs it, what's his name?
Vlad?
The greasy guy. Yeah, Vlad. When he was on the Cartoon Network, also known as CNBC that day, he said, you know, there's no margin call. Everything's great. Everything's wonderful. It's business as usual. Everything's fine, right? To then find out hours later that Robinhood had a $3 billion margin call? Something like that. They had a $2 billion, $3 billion something with DTCC where they needed to raise money on an urgent basis overnight through the VC guys. I think that's sort of the timeline. What everyone should ask themselves is, why did Citadel give Melvin money, right, as a bailout? Because Melvin was about to go under. Why did Citadel give $1 billion or $2 billion or whatever they gave Melvin? Why didn't they just give it to Robinhood? Robinhood's their customer. Robinhood is their guy who they play the payment for flow game. If you and I, right, are as tight can be, and you have a $3 billion margin call, you call me up and say, hey, Mark, we do all this business. Can you loan me $3 billion for a week? Sure, Lucy. What's it going to cost you? I'll give you 10% of my firm, right? I'll give you 10% and I'll pay interest. I'll say, no problem. I'll wire you'll have the money in 4.7 seconds as soon as I hit the return key, right? Why would Ken Griffin not have given Robinhood money? Why did they give it to Melvin, who had the absolute wrong side of the trade as everyone from Robinhood? Why? I've never heard anyone bring it up. I've never heard anyone ask the question. I would like to get the greasy-haired guy, Vlad, Griffin, Warren, Senator Warren, Gensler, head of the SEC, all in the room, Melvin in the room, and I'll do the asking of the questions. I'll ask everyone the questions. I'll create the timeline, and everyone can sit there and take notes, and that way we can get to the truth.
What would your answer be? Why did they do that? Why did they?
Because I think Citadel was so upside down in the GameStop, AMC, whatever MEME stock trades that given their leverage, they would have gone under. they would have gone under had this Melvin thing gone another day or so. Because there's no reason that a sane person without lying could say, why would Robinhood stop one side of the trades that day? Because what Robinhood did was they completely and utterly destroyed their clients. They completely, when you close one side of the market, the other side of the market, the downside of the market is a huge winner. If you have all buyers and no sellers, stock goes through the roof. When you have all sellers and no buyers, the stock collapses. And in all my years, I'm 61 years old. I've been doing this since I was 16 years old. I've never, ever, ever seen unilaterally one side of a market closed in a normal period. Now, I've seen the markets closed for 9/11. I've seen markets closed on panics. I've seen markets closed on margin. I've seen markets closed for all sorts of reasons. I've never seen one side of a group of stocks closed for a period of time, given the incremental stress that was being built in. And all the excuses around it are nothing but lies, And all these guys do at the end of the day, Robinhood pays this fine, Citadel pays that fine, this guy pays this fine. It's nothing for them. It is lunch money. I mean, Ken Griffin is one of the richest guys in the country. He doesn't bring any good to society. He doesn't help people eat. He doesn't produce anything for any good other than to feather him and his employees' pockets by ripping off others.
Did Citadel's behavior carry a financial risk to the market and to society?
Yeah, I think in the next market collapse, and it could have happened in the prior market collapse in 2008, Citadel, every market collapse is the too big to fail guy. I mean, I think Citadel is Bank of America's largest customer in the world. I'd love to see someone prove me wrong on that one. I think they're at least in the top 3, but I think they're the largest. They do more business with the big banks and the government than anyone on the planet. And they're so big, and they're too big to fail, and no one wants to shake the apple cart, that they just let it go on. And the irony is, the people who get screwed every time through the test of time is who I call Joe Sixpack. The Robinhood guys, it'll be the Wall Street bet guys, people like that, because they get done in by the people with the power, with the connections, with the clout, people who break the rules and laws, and they know they're not going to jail. They know they're not going to jail. They just pay a fine and they just keep on going.
Now, another one of the big boys that was involved here was Steve Cohn, Point 72. What role did he play? And by the way, let's go back to the Sith Lord that Patrick Byrne said was involved in promoting and naked shorting his company years ago. And then I heard, was Steve Cohn the Sith Lord? You said you found out about who it was.
Mm-hmm. So first you asked me about SAC. We got to do this. You're asking me these compounded questions.
Yes.
I'm not a fan of his at all.